I'm going to talk to you today as a CEO, and you're going to sit there today and you're going to be my board. And the way I want to talk to you is the same way that I talk to all the Wall Street investment bankers when I come into a corporation. My life generally is going into an organization. We take out a struggling chief executive officer. I become that chief executive officer. I take that place. 30 days later, I'm sitting in front of you and I'm making my pitch about what I think is going on and I think where we need to go. Now, don't read me as just some arrogant jerk, okay? I'm trying to tell you some things. But if I don't make you a little bit mad today, I'm not doing my job. And if some of you don't come away saying, wow, okay, maybe I hadn't thought about that, I'm not doing my job. You may not hire me. You can hear me say this several times today, but what I do want you to hear is you don't have to buy the car, but will you take it out for a test drive? That's the conversation I want to think with you about. So I'm just really amped about your emphasis on kingdom impact. You got it on the wall here, all of your logos. It's not just a brand. It really seems to be a passion. I enjoyed visiting with Dave about this. Also, Phil Dearborn. I'm amped about what I'm seeing in this arena of kingdom impact. Your passion and your stewardship of the students that you've been entrusted with. So this talk is really it's a conversation around the idea of the book, The Disciple Dilemma, which I was forced at gunpoint by a bunch of theological thugs to write over in Oxford. One of the guys that mentored me was Os Guinness in this, and he said, you are going to face a lot of headwind talking about this. But he said, but you're not in the Christian arena. You're not a pastor, so it doesn't matter. You can just make a lot of enemies, and they'll just take you out, and that'll be the end of it. So that's fine. We're going to talk a little bit about the ideas behind Disciple Dilemma as it applies to you in Christian higher education. And I'm hoping that some of the things I tell you have been hiding in plain sight, but are now becoming visible. I want to talk to you from a perspective of a turnaround, the idea of looking at something that may or may not appear to you to be heading in a bad direction. But you need to consider these factors, these things. So that's kind of the walk we'll go with, and we're hoping to be able to have this conversation. The thesis behind the book, and by the way, I'm not trying to sell books. That's not my objective. If anybody in here wants a Kindle, Kobo, or Nook version of this, if you'll let Dave or Carol or Darby know, the publisher will give me a free download code. I'll toss this to you, and you guys are welcome to a free copy of the book. We're having a lot of fun getting it out there. Here's the thesis of the book, though. Discipleship in the West has been hacked. It has been hacked by a malware virus that's over 18 centuries old. And it's hiding in plain sight among all of us. And it is eroding and wrecking and bringing to the table the adverse trends and symptoms that I want to talk to you about today. So this is an extension of that. When I finished putting this talk together, after we've done some deep dive research on, I'm going to call it your industry, okay, forgive me for using a business term, but your world, your neck of the woods, I pitched this all to my bride, Karen. Karen's been a CEO. She understands people. She understands organizations really, really well. So I really enjoyed being able to talk to her about this. And I was laying out all my thoughts and kind of, do I understand what's going on? And then my thoughts and recommendations for all of you. And I kind of figured I dazzled her with my brilliance, you know. And she said, well, when complicated situations like this come up, and they're really nuanced, there's a lot of enigmas here. There's a lot of twists and turns and this sort of thing. Isn't it interesting how somebody can really peer in, look at it from the outside, and then jump up and say, hey, I've got this figured out. Follow me. And I mean, man, I was swelling up and thought, I've nailed this. And she said, those kind of people are just usually crazy. So, I mean, I can only imagine the crazy challenges that all of you are facing as academic leaders in your organizations. I mean, I think about from what we call the SWOT matrix, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, the idea of just what you've been through in the pandemic, what you face and the challenges with AI and how that influences and drags things around, the culture wars that are moving through society right now. Just the general dynamics of life in general. You guys have a really challenging job. And I'm just thinking about, I just want to say thank you to all of you, because you're doing something that becomes in many ways thankless, or at least you're going to perceive them as thankless because people just don't tend to lean in and help you understand what you're doing for all of us. You're influencing the people who are influencing me. You're changing lives that are going to change my life. Thank you for that. And actually, you may actually be, I was going to use this line earlier today, and now I realize it's come true. You may actually be raising up, developing up the Lincolns, the Dr. Kings, and the Churchills. And now I find out we got a Churchill right here in the room. So, Cliff, thank you for helping me with that. Students, just like employees, are often the forgotten centerpiece of the duty of leaders. Businesses are notorious for treating people as commodities and as widgets. You're just a flow down the manufacturing line. May that never be true in higher Christian education. This is not just a widget going down a production line. These are the Imago Dei, and they are intended to be raised up in their work and in your work for the benefit of the world as servants of the Most High God. So my name is Dennis. I'm a bond servant. I'm a doulos. I'm a husband. I'm a dad. After college, I got into a ministry. And in this ministry, I had a little tiny office, little tiny chair. It was in a big organization, but it was a really small little office. And I was in charge of running some hydraulic pumps and some generators and a couple of diesel engines. And the ministry was, and that's kind of a picture of my office up on the screen.
Oh, man.
I was there to introduce Russian fighter pilots to Jesus. My ministry. So that's the F-15, my passion bird. Love that airplane. 2,815 dogfights as of today. Has never lost a dogfight in a real fight. The only aircraft in the history of the world has never lost a dogfight. Closest record to it's a P-51 Mustang at 112. So that's one serious weapon system because it's well equipped. It can understand the environment that it's operating in. It can engage and it can work well. So that was my first 8 years out of college. Today, I work in corporate turnarounds. The folks on the left are all the investment bankers that I've worked for. The folks on the right side of the screen are the corporations that I participated in turnarounds with. And I get invited, like I said, as a CEO of these struggling companies. And, the job is to try to help get it back on track, to get it healthy, to get a good leadership team in place, and then for me to get out of the way and go do this somewhere else. What do you do in a turnaround situation? Well, we're going for the cause. We don't want to be chasing the distractions. We don't want to be chasing the symptoms. Now, look, you guys may be thinking, he's just some dark side pagan capitalist, so he's going to just come up with these typical plays like, I'm going to work everybody harder, kick the dog, fire the widows, raise the prices. That's all these guys know how to do. That's really a normal common play for companies that are struggling, even if they don't know they're struggling. Budgets are always the first thing you run to. We're going to slash the budget. We got a crisis, we're going to slash the budget. People start thinking about cutting headcount. We got a crisis, cut the headcount. We got a crisis, let's spend a lot more money. Let's just throw money at the problem, right? Those are the typical choices, but all of them are chasing the symptoms and not the cause. So if you're going after the adverse trends in higher Christian education we're about to talk about, it's a little bit like throwing aspirin at COVID or throwing aspirin at a cold. You might feel a little better, but that's not effective. So what we're going to try and do is peel back just a little bit what's under the hood. And we're going to chase one set of symptoms that are going to lead us to another set of symptoms. And then we're going to get to the cause. I'm about to try to tell you the cause. Now, again, don't take me some arrogant jerk. I'm trying to lay this in front of you. You don't have to buy the car, okay? But here we go. There are a lot of symptoms that you find in Western Christianity today, and so I want to unpack these. And I want to emphasize this point also, because when we talk about the problem in discipleship, both churches, seminaries, colleges, and groups, and we've had a lot of conversations with people quickly lean and go, okay, you're trying to blame me. This is not your fault. The stuff we're going to talk about today is not your fault. It's not your church's fault. It's not your pastor's fault. This is, however, our responsibility. It's here in front of us. And now I'm going to hopefully peel back a little bit of the curtain and say, can you see this, perhaps, as I see this? And does this take us into this? Now, remember, you're my board. You got to decide whether this guy's got a clue or not, and whether you want to keep him in this conversation. But I'm hoping today, as Wilberforce would say, you may decide to turn your head the other way, but you can never again say you do not know. That's sort of the flow of the thought that we go through here. We're absolutely going to talk about a path forward in this as well. I'm not going to leave you hanging with just gloom and despair. And so I want to start with leadership. I really enjoyed Jeff's work on leadership today. Thank you for those great comments, interaction of the team. I think you got that very, very well said and very well right. Your duty as a leader is first, this is me talking. You don't have to buy it. This is what I want you to hear. Your job as a leader is first to frame the mission of the organization that you're in. The mission. We're going to talk more about that. Your second duty then is to establish a supporting culture, the glue that holds that mission front and center. Everything you do, from deciding on the donuts for the morning to dealing with the crisis of the day, centers around, I am looking at the mission. My culture is equipped and established to support that, and now we deal with this circumstance or this issue. That's your job. Leaders own mission and culture. That is your responsibility, first and foremost above all other things. Then the turnaround has got to permeate into the lives of the people on the front line. For me, in my world, those are employees, they're investors, they're customers, they're the stakeholders of the organization. For you, of course, this becomes faculty, students, parents, and the investors who want to help your organization and help you run around. So let's get on the chase here of this. And the question I want you to hang in your mind is, what is it, Dennis, you're actually asking me to do? Don't let me off the hook today without us answering what it is I'm asking you as the board, as the leaders, to do going forward from here. 8 a.m. tomorrow, maybe 4 p.m. this afternoon. Where are we going? I want to talk to you about three things. I want to talk about symptoms, follow that trail. I want to get to a cause, and then I want to talk about the path forward. That's three things: symptoms, cause, path forward. That's where we're going. So let's start with business quadrants on the chart up here. This is a very common business analytical tool people use. Maybe you've used this before too. Boston Consulting Group uses this all the time. McKinsey uses this all the time. You just see a lot of private equity Wall Street firms using it. 4 quadrants here: thriving, hoping, struggling, inertia. You see those. Higher Christian education is going to be our subject matter from 2015 to 2023. Let's explain those quadrants for a minute. Thriving, as you move up and down the vertical scale, is about head count. Is your enrollment going up or is it going down? As you cross that dotted center line going down, you're losing head count in the trend. Above, of course, you're gaining. To the left of the center line standing up in the vertical is the investment process going from left to right. So thriving, I'm gaining head count, and I'm also enjoying increasing investment in the organization. The bottom right quadrant, hoping, well, I'm losing head count, but I'm still pouring money into this thing. I'm hoping I'm going to catch up. The inertia quadrant, upper left, is the idea that I am losing investment, but I'm still keeping my head count up and growing, and so I'm running on inertia. Lower left-hand quadrant, struggling. I'm losing my head count, I'm losing my investment, I'm struggling. These, whether you like them or not, are the kind of categories guys like me use when I start looking at industries I want to invest in and companies I want to help turn around. I'm trying to look at that. So let's take a look here. I'm going to plot, our team did this for us, 234 institutions in higher Christian education. The dot is going to show you their placement as a trend from 2015 to 2023. I don't think any of your organizations are in this plot. I'm pretty sure they're not. Let's look. Here's the plot. Now, you can look at that and you can say, well, come on, man, they're kind of in the center. I mean, right? Everything's okay there. No big deal. I want to show you with a little orange bullseye where the median of your industry, I'm going to use the term industry, hits right now with these 234 schools. If you take all the math and you average that out, it's on the line between struggling and hoping.
And Dennis, is this U.S., is it North American?
This
global?
is North American schools.
Got it.
North American schools. There's Canada and there's U.S. involved in this stack.
But it's Christian education.
Christian. This is Christian. I'm glad you said that, Dave, because what we should do for a second is we should say, hey, who's the competition? Well, it's the state schools. Let's throw the state schools up there and say, where do they fit? This comes from a Wall Street Journal survey that just finished this August. Same criteria, looking at the state schools. Where did they come? Now, for those of you who are thinking, well, hey, come on, those guys get state and federal funding. I urge you to do a little research on what's going on with state and federal funding in those state-funded schools. It's precipitously dropping off. Statistics, depending on which studies you look at, range between they've lost half, they've lost 3/4 of their quote-unquote cash flow from state and federal sources over the last 8 years. But look where they are. Just a sense of this. Now, let me go back to being the dark side pagan capitalist for a second. This, when I look at the higher Christian education school arena, you are ripe for a turnaround. 67% of the schools are in the lower two quadrants, struggling and hoping. And if I add in the inertia crew, 73% are sitting in that stack. And that's where guys like me come in. I'm the buzzard that wants to get in on this thing and take over organizations like this because you are ripe for a turnaround.
You bring your applications.
So, what is this really starting out with? This is one little adverse trend, but it weighs heavily on the minds, I would bet, of your boards, your trustees, your faculty. I would imagine this kind of stuff is echoing in your minds as I go along. Please correct me later if I'm wrong. Persecute me during the Q&A. Help me see where you really put your mind and attention. But this is one, and we're going to track some others. I want to throw one more, quote unquote, campus-ish symptom out there. I hear this all the time as I go to Christian colleges and I go to seminaries. We are seeing a significant decline in student biblical literacy. I'm seeing some head nods from everybody, both online and out in the room. Thank you. And anxiousness and stress among students is eating our budgets and really chewing up our faculty's time in these days, in these times. What's going on there? I'm going to say that these trends are symptoms of a deeper thing, not just campus curb appeal. The trends point to causes, the roots beneath the surface that we really need to track down into. So I want to tour a few more symptoms, and I want to try to highlight the cause and the way forward, like we said before. The way for this trail goes far beyond just your campus. I'm taking us upstream before the campus, and I'm starting to look at a national level first. This is a religiosity index. For those of you not familiar with those, like I used to not be familiar with that, religiosity is a sociological quantizing tool. It says, how is a particular culture, in this case North America, thinking about its religious practices? How is it participating? How are individual people participating and acting as religious people in their social life? So as it goes up, you're more religious. As it goes down, you're less religious. Each of the boxes that I'm going to show you here point to something very interesting. As we gray the line out, I'm going to leave that center bar to show you what's considered to be best fit midpoint. The Cold War was a sociological moment. In America, it was viewed as an existential fight between good and evil, and religiosity correspondingly went up. As you move a little further over, though, into the early 60s, the counterculture began to emerge on the scene. And I know you all are far better versed than I am at this, but when you think about things like the Vietnam War, post-modernity taking traction into this thing, and as you go a little further to the right, but you're still on this countercultural wave, Roe v. Wade, things like this are dragging the religiosity index down. And see how it begins to really arc its way down. Now, there's a bunch of other things that popped up that hit the headlines, but they didn't move the line much. And I just threw those up there for fun. Big Eva, big evangelicalism is coming on the scene as you look at the early 80s as in terms of social impact in the culture, but it's not moving the line very much. Black Monday, the financial crisis of '88. When you think about some of the early first attack on the World Trade Center, you think about the Chechen Wars, you think about the Crimean overtakes, all this led to not much changing in religiosity. So what I really want to do is I want to look at this right-hand side of this graph from 1952 to 2012, right? So we're staring at 60 years, and when you get to 98, this curve starts heading downhill fast. And the stuff that's driving this is coming to a campus near you. Let's talk about that a little bit, because that's really the interesting piece of this. This is where we see the entry of the nuns, the duns, the de-churched, the evangelicals, the spiritual but not religious. This is their way, their crest. For those of you who are Gen X or millennial, think 25 years old to 60 years old, this is your time. You're an idealistic, young, highly motivated person watching all this stuff happening. And it's being absorbed into your life, whether you believe what they're saying or not. This is coming alive. Nuns and duns perceive Christianity really as a loss of personal freedom. 2, a subjugated people. You guys are controlled by a capricious God, or just a bunch of angry, evil, old white guys. And you're intolerant zealots, and you demand that everybody else conform to your religious whims. And you're forcing everybody to abandon science, logic, and reason for some kind of faith fairy tale. That's what's going on in the minds of the people we call the nuns, the duns, and you can tack on all the other stuff too, the evangelicals, de-church, and so on, de-converts. And you're seeing a lot of books popping out on this right now. But this point is another trend for us to think about. The nuns and the duns post-truth claim is not just affecting them as they walk away from their faith. And they were in the faith. They were in the pews. They were in those churches. It's contaminating the people who stayed behind and stayed in the church, who stayed in the pews. And that's parents of your students, and it is your students. That's some of the cultural momentum that's being flooded into your people. So the local church is supplying you with your students. Is that a good thing? Maybe. I like this. Yeah, the point I really want to bring up again for everybody to hear is this is not your pastor's fault. This is not your fault in what you do as academic leaders. But we have to talk about it because boards deal with provocative questions. Let's start well before today's students were around. Let's go all the way back to 1972. And let's take a look at declining attendance in Protestant churches. This is the entire swath of Protestants, not just the main lines, but evangelicals as well. From 1972 to 2010, 38 years. I want you to look at the bottom, at the black line and the gray line. These are the people who attend monthly and yearly. Just they hit the Easter service and the Christmas service. 38 years, not much happened. But look at the blue line and look at the red line. Here's where we really want to zero in. The people who are weekly church attenders going downhill, the people who are the rares and nevers uphill, let's quantize that period. That's 5 million people from 72 to 2010 that walked out of regular attendance, if they even came ever again at all. Now, that means to me that we need to look a little further forward. Let's take this 2010 and bring it a little closer in. And as these nuns and duns are dwarfing the walk-offs in previous generations, right? These millennials who are walking out the door are doing something different than the boomer and the greatest generation exits did. When the boomers and the greatest had kids, they came back to church. The millennials aren't coming back to church. They're gone. At least so far, they're gone. Let's get a little closer to your students' timeline. We're going to look from 2007 to 2019. Everything you see indexes on the vertical as a percentage of the U.S. population. So we'll translate that to numbers a little more significant in a minute. Here are 2 lines at the top, blue line and kind of an orangish red line, depending on how brilliant your monitor is. The blues are the Protestants, the reds are the Catholics. Notice the trend is sloping downhill. Let's bring on a different group. Let's bring on the nuns, the agnostics, and the atheists. Notice the trend there. Let's quantify that. Christianity, through this phase, 33 million people leave. The nothings, the agnostics and the atheists, they plus 30 million. Now, there's about 300,000-ish Protestant churches in the U.S. There's about 52 million-ish who claim to attend church. Think about the numbers, get the contrast on this thing, right? As a CEO, I'm thinking there's some massive churn going on inside this organization. Massive churn. You're bringing a wonderful crowd of people in the front door, but there's a big hole in the bucket going out the back door. This decline is not just a couple of pandemic timeout years for us. There's another trend here. You're being shipped students who grew up in what we call the great exodus, not exodus, the exit us, the great exit us. These numbers, just any way you slice it, sync up. A lot of Christ followers are not following Christ anymore. Christian culture was changing during this time, and it is changing right now. Why? What does this really mean for you in your role as an academic leader? Culture is the really interesting word to start grabbing hold of here. It's the muscle memory. Culture is the muscle memory of how people live and act when you're not around. I want that to soak in with you for just a minute. People pick up culture not from what you say, but from how you live, and they see how you live. Now, I mean, don't head for the exit yet. I'm not trying to get everybody to go running out the door.
Well, can you say that line again? About muscle memory?
Muscle memory. Culture is the muscle memory, the glue, the DNA you're embedding inside of people so that this is how they behave when you, the leader, are not around. People pick up culture, not from your words, but from your life as a leader. Now, let me just kind of tack on again to Jeff. I'm sorry I have to keep on plagiarizing Jeff, but I'm loving what Jeff said today, right? When you think about the world that you live in as a leader, priorities are a problem, right? I mean, it is Charles Hummel's book, Tyranny of the Urgent, right? The tyranny of traditions, the tyranny of what you got to do right now to get past the day, firefighting, virtue signaling, keeping up with people. There's just meetings. It just goes on and on and on. And the gray background is where I'm going to take you today as a conversation. The stuff that's kind of lost through the black. Mission, culture, people. This is your world. Now, what we have to assume as we ramble through this high-speed life, not taking Jeff's advice, but just screaming through our day, right, is I guess everything's going okay down below deck. I want to read you a really short quote here. He was born in a Christian country. Of course, he is a Christian. His father was a member of the Church of England. So is he. When such is the hereditary religion handed down from generation to generation, it cannot surprise us to observe young men of sense and spirit beginning to doubt altogether the truth of the system they have been brought up in. That's William Wilberforce in 1797. The book is A Practical View. Great read. It is really hard to pass on what we do not have. I was stunned when the Bonhoeffer Project hit me with this statistic. Less than 20% of pastors have ever been discipled. And for the lay people, they calibrated in the 3 to 8% range at most. Now, we're going to have to take apart what the word disciple means, because a lot of people go to sleep when I use the word. They go, oh, you have paint drawing, discipleship, you have Bible study, church member, mission trip, small group. Yeah, that's discipleship. No, it's not. Those are symptoms. That's not discipleship. And I want to talk about that. That's really, really important to get this. As an organizational leader, you've got to get the difference between the symptoms and the cause. So crucial for us. Mass production discipling using many of those tools is an urban legend. Mass production discipleship. I stick you in a room, you get a sermon series, you get this course, don't shoot me yet. You get a course, you get out, you're a disciple, right? That's mass production discipling, programs, seminars, all this activity. But that's not. To think that seminars and sermons and small groups and cell phones can replace intimate, biblical, Christ-centered discipling, that's a very specious beast to follow. So here's the trend. Discipleship is presumed, yet few have actually been fully exposed to Christ's way. Now, in Q&A, if you want to pursue some of this, we can look at a lot of the Bible passages for the sake of time. I'm going to keep pushing this so that we get through this. Let's talk about icebergs for just a minute. An iceberg, when you taxi up to it in a boat and look at it, is a really impressive thing. Big, huge, wow, wonderful. You know where I'm going with this illustration. We put a plot of 234 schools up there, and we said, wow, look at that plot. But there's stuff going on underneath that's driving all this, and we've got to get down to that. We've got to follow that. There's much larger issues. Think about going into a restaurant. You walk into a restaurant, right? Pick a restaurant you've been meaning to check out. You walk in, you're standing there at the hostess desk. 60% of the employees walk out while you're standing there. The rest of the folks who work there won't even look at you. They won't talk to you. They've got nothing to say to you. And when you walk up to one, you say, hey, what's good here? They just go, talk to the chef. And then they walk out the door. Are you going to stick around in a place like that for dinner? Let's take that illustration to church. I want to put 7 quick factors up on the table. Say, again, this is the stuff that's feeding the people that you have in your charge in your schools today. The nuns and the duns we talked about a minute ago. 6 out of 10 millennials who were raised in church are walking out. The not my jobbers. A third of the church today says talking about the gospel, talking about my faith, that's not my job. That's your job as a professor or my pastor's job. Jesus among other gods. 40%, 4 out of 10 people who stay behind in the pews say, Jesus isn't the only way to God. The inerts. 8 out of 10 people in the pews today have no prayer life, no Bible study, no true community, and they attend church 1.7 times a month. If you think about the uns, we call these the uns, they're unable, unwilling, unprepared to give the reason for the hope that's within them. 1 Peter 3, of course, we're talking about there. Mutes on the good news. That might sound like some of these others, but what it means is 9 out of 10 people sitting in the pews have not in the last year, and perhaps longer, even talked with anybody outside the church about their faith. And the great American individualism. Stay out of my life. I'm a solo disciple. I don't need nothing from nobody. So we've got this dynamic, and I'm just hoping this question's coming to mind. Do you think something's wrong with that kind of a picture? Now, you don't have to buy the statistics exactly, although we've got great references for these research houses that did this. But if 1 or 2 of these is true, does this begin to tip the direction a little bit about your thoughts, about the culture that's feeding the students that are showing up on your campuses and the students that aren't showing up on your campuses? I'm going to suggest to you that the symptoms we've seen so far are pointing to the loss of 4 biblical themes: meaning, purpose, identity, and belonging. Meaning, why am I here? Purpose, what am I here for? Identity, who am I? Am I even really known? And belonging, would you accept me if you do know who I am? Meaning, purpose, identity, belonging. These are at the center of human longing. There are 4 ideas fulfilled only in Christ. These words are the real outworkings for the individual who is a follower of Christ. I don't mean like Facebook follower. I mean following Christ. Not veering to the left, not to the right, and you are in motion. You're in motion. We are not attacking pastors and churches. The church didn't cause this. You didn't cause this. But the thing that I want to get back to you is that no business turnaround that I've experienced and no church turnaround that I've been involved with. I've been elder in a mega church, I've been elder in a small church, I've been participant in a lot of churches as we've moved around. When you turn businesses around, you have to kind of live a gypsy's life. So I've had a wonderful exposure to some of the diverse, beautiful, exegetical orthodoxy of so many different groups, right? You aren't going to succeed if in your pursuit of fixing things, you're throwing money and marketing at the problem. You can't buy your way out of the adverse trends that you see today. That's what I want to haunt you with. You can't buy your way, you can't cosmetic your way out of the adverse trends we're talking about. It's going to take something very different. So, this is what we just talked about for adversities. Enrollment challenges, investment trends, declining biblical literacy, anxiousness and stress, the decline of religiosity, the nuns and the duns, the great exit us, the mutes, the inerts, the uns, the not my jobbers, the solos. These are just samples of a few of the things that are going on out there. But they all point back to this idea of a loss of meaning, purpose, identity, belonging. And by the way, for me as a turnaround CEO, that's the primary thing I'm going for when I'm trying to fix a business that's in free fall. And some of the businesses don't even know they're in free fall. You are, in effect, as an academic leader, being forced to work much harder today than you ever have before to get students to that intended starting point you had established for the educational journeys that are with you. Because these people have been handicapped so much getting to you compared to the people 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I'm not a golfer, but the golfers call this kind of a challenge a really long putt. These trends can seem kind of overwhelming, right? Keep your Prozac in your pocket. We're going to go forward with some ideas about this path forward. The talk was labeled imperial discipleship, not imperial discipleship, but imperial discipleship. That's a word that actually starts imperial. When you think about empires, the Empire Strikes Back, that word actually starts with an I in its root, imperial Russia. This is imperial, and it means heavenly, sublime, of God. This is the conversation I want to have with you, because I'm going to try to sell you a consideration. Imperial discipleship by you is the way out of these adverse trends. That can seem like a pretty long way around, right? We're talking about discipleship, but I've got this stuff over here: cash flow, right? Enrollment, right? Anxiety and stress, and you want me to talk about discipleship. The most poignant, and of course the final directive of Christ, we all know this, Matthew 28:19. Go and make disciples. Go and progress disciples. As you go progressing, go progress disciples. The matite, right? That's where we're talking about this. Both, here it comes the heresy. This mission is both individual for you and I as individuals, it's also corporate. It is the mission of every church, every higher Christian education institution, every person who follows Christ. That's where I want to go with this. The line to burn me at the station, one over to the right. Maybe Carol, you can get some matches. I'm blaming here. But I'm trying to make this point that the way forward for your students against the symptoms, attacking the symptoms, is going after this cause, which is the failure, the erosion of discipleship. And I want it to be, as a thought today, led by you in higher Christian education. Let me throw up another little chart here for you to look at to reinforce something I said before. Your focus as a leader is on the center of the cross here, the mission. Do you really know why you're here? Do you really know why your organization is here? From there, you drive culture. From there, you influence the individuals. And only then and only there do you drive performance metrics. People always try to get that backwards. I'm always walking into corporations that are in trouble, and they're trying to start over here on the metrics. We're losing money. Cut heads. We're losing money. Slash the budget. We're losing money. Spend more money. They're over there on the metrics. But I have yet to find a struggling corporation, the ones I've worked with, and the ones I've advised, and the ones I've consulted with, that knew their mission. They've lost it. Now, that's not just a word salad. Let me give you a little illustration of this. General Electric Corporation decided that their mission could be thrown aside. At that point in time, General Electric, this is in the late 90s, was worth $524 billion. That's with a B. That would make them the 13th largest economy in the world at that point in time, at $524 billion. It only took them 8 years to lose 90% of their market value because they went to what was called boundaryless pursuit of capital. The mission went away, and the corporation tanked. And the symptoms were coming on left and right. Personnel problems, of course, financing problems, stock market problems, even their identity as a brand. Mission is really crucial for all of us to get because you own this. This is your turf. I want you to just get this flow. I really want you to lock in on that flow. Don't knee-jerk to the metrics. Go back to the beginning. Go back and find the cause. So let's talk about missions for a minute. Just get some fun with this. I want you to just get the sense of how inspiring a mission can actually be. Anybody know the mission of the U.S. Air Force? I'm really disappointed because I told you. Introduce Russian fighter pilots to Jesus. No, that's not the mission. The mission of the Air Force is to fly and to fight and to win. And for guys like me and for all the people who support us, those important people who make the airplanes fly, that is a really compelling mission when you think about it. We're going to fly, we're going to fight, we're going to win. Nobody's taking us out. We're going to dominate. Here's another one. I love SpaceX's mission. This is really kind of cool. Making humanity multi-planetary. That is really, really cool. I have no idea why that white block just disappeared there. Oh well. Every organization's mission is to impel people, to impel individuals to lean in toward something larger. That's mission. What's your mission in higher Christian education? Is your mission student education? Or could it possibly be educated disciples? I want to humbly lay this idea at your feet as we wrap this up. Your prime mission is discipleship. Can one actually climb the scaffold you're building of biblical higher education without a disciple's sure foundation beneath it? 3 terms from the Old Testament period in the Hebrews, the Bet Sefer, the Bet Midrash, the Bet Talmud. We wrote about this in a peer-reviewed European journal called Kairos, Evangelical Group. What does that mean? Discipleship, think of it as a wheel. I'm going to show you some aspects of discipleship. And again, these are integration points for a disciple. From Scripture, we make the case. If you get the Kindle, you can see how we make this case. But it's evaluate. Who is Christ? Believe. I now know who Christ is. I surrender to him. I'm joining into a community to pursue and to follow. Academics and imitation. Usually this one's thrown on you guys in the academic world. This is where a disciple gets a tutor, a mentor, a coach to go alongside them in learning, to develop their learning, to begin to understand what does lordship really mean. That's a very rarely understood term today with a lot of believers. Sanctification, being personally coached. This isn't 30 people in a room, personally coached. 3rd phase, going out to make. This is another place where you see some rare stuff. Having a wingman, a colleague walking alongside who knows me. Anybody know the term 2 a.m. Waffle House friend?
Yes.
Waffle House is that little ubiquitous restaurant that serves bacon and eggs 24/7, 365. Who are your 2 a.m. Waffle House friends? You can call at 2 a.m. and say, hey, meet me at the Waffle House, bring a shovel, don't ask questions. That's the question that we want to ask. Do we have wingmen? And then can we then go out and give the reason for the hope that is within us? That's the wheel of discipleship that we try to construct for the doulos. Are we making doulos or are we making intellectuals? That's the question that we have to think about. Western discipleship has fragmented. The research is saying lordship, sanctification, being coached, having wingmen, knowing how to go and make an invite. And today, even believing and surrendering, those are fragmenting away from the Western disciples' life. This is the bondservant, the wheel, the complete wheel. And so what I want to appeal to you about is this. Why do you personally exist? Why does your institution exist? Francis Schaeffer talked about this in his 1970s book, how should we then live? We talked about the erosion, the loss of discipleship because of meaning, purpose, identity, belonging, being subsumed by the ideas of personal peace and prosperity. Our life and our organization is to be and to make disciples and to team people to be with other disciples. That's my plea for you. Oh, and introduce Russian fighter pilots to Jesus. That's the other one. Thanks for the time.